everyone, my name is Gia Gupta and I'm the co-founder and co-president of Little Mentors. Welcome to Teddy Talks, a platform dedicated to bringing you engaging conversations with remarkable individuals. Today, we are thrilled to have an inspiring guest joining us, Audrey Wisch, the co-founder and CEO of Curious Cardinals, a company that connects K-12 students with college-age mentors to discover their passions across mental health, coding, songwriting, rocket science, and more. Under Audrey's visionary leadership, Curious Cardinals has raised millions of dollars in seed funding and served thousands of students, earning her recognition on Forbes 30 Under 30 and CNN. Curious Cardinals has emerged as a leading force in revolutionizing the way children learn, fostering a community of lifelong learners and doers. In this episode of Teddy Talks, we have the incredible privilege of delving into Audrey's remarkable journey, starting in high school to the walls of Stanford to now Curious Cardinals. We will explore the spark that piqued her own curiosity, the challenges she faced along the way, and the lessons she learned along her entrepreneurial journey. So without further ado, let's get started. Can you start talking a little bit about your journey to how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. And thank you, Gia, for having me. As I said, I'm so impressed our high schooler, Curious Cardinals, is all about what young change makers can do. But I started Curious Cardinals when I was a freshman at Stanford. I was a history major at Stanford, thought I was pre-law with my 10-year life plan set. I aspired to be the next Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And one of the things I had done at Stanford was I taught English to members of the janitorial staff, which was one of the favorite ways I spent my time. And then I was sent home from Stanford due to the pandemic and couldn't continue with that. I had some extra time on my hands, so I reached out to a bunch of families and decided to start tutoring. Working with students, I observed how disengaged and uninspired they were with what they were learning in school and how they were absorbing and regurgitating what they were reading in a textbook, but didn't know why they were learning what they were learning. There was also a disconnect between the things they were genuinely interested in and what they were learning in school. So that inspired me to apply what they were learning to my own passions in hopes of igniting their imagination for what they could pursue and why, as well as tapping into their own interests, and saw that that was a super effective way to guide their learning forward. One of them asked for math help. I wasn't as passionate about math, so that's where one of my eventual co-founders came into the picture. Alec was an aerospace engineer, and he started applying what they were learning in math to how airplanes fly. And fast forward, they were telling all their friends about us. I'm a super connector by heart. So I started bringing in my most passionate, inspiring peers at Stanford and from high school at other universities who could do the same thing and really kind of hone into that passion, that love of learning. And Curious Cardinals was born that summer. We both had internships, so we didn't set out to make this our life's work or even a startup at the time. We just thought this was a passion project we loved and were so deeply passionate about ourselves. And then we pursued it in the pandemic, and we thought it was kind of our gap year passion project. And when it really took off and we observed, wow, this is a really critical time for change in the K-12 education landscape, we decided not to go back to school and to continue building and growing Curious Cardinals. So now it's been 3 years. We have a team of 12 people building Curious Cardinals with us and over 500 mentors from across the globe.
Wow.
And that's a little bit about the journey up to this point.
Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations on everything you guys have accomplished. I wanted to delve into something that you mentioned earlier about having this 10-year plan of wanting to go pre-law. And I think that's something a lot of teenagers can empathize with, especially if they have this pressure to create a certain plan and outline of where their life wants to be. How did you take the risk to deviate from that, especially after you'd had this whole ambition and dream you've been building up over years?
Yeah, so it's funny. One of the first courses I taught at Curious Cardinals was on mass incarceration. In wake of the Black Lives Matter movement in spring of 2020, my student on the East Coast and my student on the West Coast were asking me similar questions in light of the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I started creating resource guides, and I was really passionate about criminal justice reform, had done some extensive work and learning on it at Stanford, and had been passionate in high school and passionate about why aren't we taught these things, and had invited speakers who were amazing law professors, like the leading law professor on the intersection of race and the law, Randall Kennedy, and then Erwin Chemerinsky, the dean of Berkeley Law School, who is the most cited constitutional scholar. So all these amazing opportunities that aligned with where I thought I was going when working on Curious Cardinals. And then kind of outside of the teaching itself and the teaching the subject matter I care deeply about, I was just so jazzed up about all the other stuff happening. I was never a STEM kid. I kind of prematurely deemed myself a humanities gal, if anything, and seeing what students were able to learn with my STEM peers and like this passion they were sparking, I was just so obsessed with what we were doing and so excited to continue building it further. And so I started to kind of question, am I deviating from my path? If I take a gap year, it's one more year to law school than I had thought. And I started doing some self-reflecting and thinking, what is this kind of tension internally? Because this honestly feels so right. I love this. And I realized that at its core, why I wanted to be the next Ruth Bader Ginsburg was because I was passionate about championing individuality, working with an individual, representing them, getting to know them. But I wanted to have a systemic impact. I wanted to make a change at the core that would change for the better the lives of not just 2 or 3 individuals, but hundreds, thousands, millions. Never in a million years would I have thought of technology as the vehicle to enact that impact. But I realized that at its core, what I was doing at Curious Cardinals was the same as to why I was passionate about pursuing that track, championing individuality and doing so in a way that hopefully will enable a systemic impact. So I think when you have that sense of self-awareness as to what motivates you and what type of mark you want to leave in the world, it might manifest in many shapes or forms you can't even imagine. But when you realize at its core that it's the same thing, that kind of was the guiding factor for me. And that allowed me to start to gain the comfort to go off track, or as I called it at the time. And I think it's a continual learning and progression. I think Curious Cardinals is called curious because we want people to keep their eyes and their ears open. And when you have one set track, it's easy to say, no, I don't want to do that. That's deviating from what I'm supposed to do. But that might mean limiting yourself to other opportunities and other doors that might bring you somewhere where you're even more destined to be. So I think that's another thing we always say. Cardinals is like the bird. We want to give people that 360-degree view of the horizon because often students have tunnel vision. They can only see college or that end destination instead of that big holistic journey. And so when you're able to look that big picture, suddenly you have more comfort in, let me just take this moment by moment, month by month, instead of mapping out this whole life journey ahead of yourself.
I think that those are amazing points, especially something that really resonated with me was how you're talking about connecting to the core values of what you're doing, because sometimes it can get really diluted, but understanding really what you're trying to do with these different goals and ambitions can help you see that redirection isn't the worst thing in the world and it can actually help you. So that was really impactful. So thank you for that. I think that one thing I wanted to touch on was how, as you mentioned earlier, there is this really strong case right now for early specialization, and for a lot of students to have a spike or a passion that they're constantly pursuing, and it can lead to people having tunnel vision. So, how do we nurture interdisciplinary learning and continuous discovery and learning along the journey while also finding the balance between the focus and the wandering that can be fundamental to creativity?
An awesome question. And I think one that I think about often. I would say our approach at Curious Cardinals, so we connect K through 12 students to college and recent grad mentors to help them discover and pursue their passions, as well as gain confidence in other areas where it's lacking. So we're all about meeting students where they're at in their journey. And so I think that's the first key point. You have to figure out where you're at. So the 3 paths we have are the exploratory journey for students who have no idea what they're interested in or a vague idea, who embark on a guided exploration. Maybe you love climate change, but you don't consider yourself a STEM person. So you would love the opportunity to have that guidance without the ramification of a bad grade or peer judgment if you give the wrong answer, in a very safe environment to hopefully open up doors that maybe you are considering but unsure of. Or if you have no idea at all what you're interested in, want to just gain some exposure. A key thing is exposure, like how much you know is out there in the world. So many students want to be a lawyer, as I did, because you think like, wow, that's a way I can make a great impact, or that's a way I can have a stable job. But there are so many ways in 2023 to make a positive impact in the world. And so it often requires that exposure to the different possibilities. The second track we have at Curious Cardinals is the Passion Project. And that's for students who either have a really strong sense of their passion. Maybe they want to be a doctor one day, but they're like, what can I do with that strong passion? And they work with a mentor to map out a project to bring a vision to fruition, but also have the experience of project-based learning, like actually doing something with an interest and bringing it into the world. For other students, it's they have a dream project in mind, but there's often obstacles they encounter in their journey that hold them back or demoralize them or make it hard to go from idea stage to actually bringing it to fruition. And so the mentor is meant to hold you accountable, fill in the gaps of your knowledge where it's lacking, and make that vision possible and coming to life. And then the third area is academic mentorship. We say tutoring is the T word at Curious Cardinals because it has a little bit of a connotation of being a remedy for Friday's test, kind of transactional, like a Band-Aid solution, as well as like there's a deficiency, something wrong with you. I really could have benefited from an academic math mentor at Curious Cardinals. I was one of the few girls in my honors math class. I lacked a lot of confidence in STEM. Ultimately, when I got a bad grade one year, I went down to the regular math track because I was like, I'm not meant to be here. And I wish I had a female engineer, math major, computer science major mentor, because truthfully, it wasn't a matter of competence. It all came down to my confidence. I really doubted myself. And every time I struggled, I would in my head have these negative voices. And so had I had a mentor who I could have seen myself and looked up to, who knows, maybe I would have gone to Stanford wanting to be an engineer. But I think I share that because it's really about where are you at in your journey and finding the resources, opportunities, mentorship accordingly. And it's not binary. It's not like do one or other. Maybe you're in the path of transforming your relationship with a subject that really is hard for you or really harms your confidence, while also you have this dream project in mind or you want to start exploring. But I think being real with where you're at, because once you start to lose that sense of self-awareness and sense of self as to where you're at in your journey, there's just so many options. It can be very overwhelming. But I think if you think, where am I at today? Do I have an interest and I'm just kind of itching to do something with it? Listen to podcasts on it, read books on it, find people in the industry to talk to on it, pursue a passion project on it, like lean into that organic feeling. Or I feel super lost. I spend a lot of time on social media and I kind of feel like I don't know what my purpose is. Begin that exploratory journey. Begin thinking, I'm going to try learning something new every week. I'm going to speak to an industry professional once a week. I'm going to do an exploratory journey with a Curious Cardinals mentor. But I think it's all about identifying where you stand and then just getting started. That's another key thing I think that I learned from my entrepreneurial journey is the best thing to do is to start. It's easy to have perfection standards cripple you and hold you back from just putting something out there into the world. But there's so much you can learn by just getting started.
That leads perfectly into my next question. And I think that's really important. The one thing that you kept bringing up that really stood out to me was how you have to meet kids where they are. And I think that everyone's at a different stage in their own journey, and helping them figure out where to go from there is extremely important. But you ended off talking about how you need to get started. And I think that kind of juxtaposes with a lot of teenagers and a fear they have, which is a fear to commit. People might write off an idea because they don't think it's the right time right now, or they're unsure if this is something they really want to commit to for the rest of their future. So when there are so many problems in our world right now, whether it's mental health or climate change, or even recently the regulation of artificial intelligence, how does one person choose a problem to address? And I know there's kind of like this pressure to commit to one problem and then like dedicate your life towards it. So how do you feel about that?
That's an amazing question. I love that. And I definitely felt that myself being in high school and realizing all the injustices in our world and it's easy to feel crippled by where do I start or where can I make the greatest impact? I again will reiterate the advice I said at the beginning, which is looking inwards and figuring out what you feel uniquely suited to do, what motivates you, what feels aligned with your values and the legacy you want to have in the world. I think the second thing is not prematurely limiting yourself. We live in a hyper interconnected world, but unfortunately we teach kids in silos so often. That's one of the keys to our approach at Curious Cardinals is interdisciplinary learning. You love sports, learn sports analytics or sports journalism, or you love fashion, learn about fast fashion and sustainability. There's so many ways to tie the things that you're interested in that aren't represented in school or textbooks to future pathways, future professions, or really tactical skills you can really benefit from gaining. So to that end, I think another thing is when you realize the interconnectedness of things, it'll often strengthen your ability to comment on one or the other. So in high school, I was very passionate, I said, about immigration and criminal justice reform. At Stanford, my freshman year, I took an intro STEM, which is this course you apply for at Stanford, on the history of the feminist mystique. No, feminist mystique is Betty Friedan's.
Yeah.
And it was based off of that, the history of the feminist critique. And it was the most inspiring course. And it very much inspired so much of our approach to learning at Curious Cardinals, which is representation matters is one of the core pillars. Not only learning from people you can see yourself in, but learning about yourself and your identity, especially when that learning is often neglected in typical textbooks. So I just found that to be the most empowering course. I loved learning about the history of women. It was like what I had learned in junior year American history, but through a feminist lens. And I was like, why didn't we learn about these figures? It was so empowering for me to have the historical context to make sense of gender inequity in the world. And that was one of my favorite things about being a historian. I love Marcus Garvey's quote, "A people without its past is like a tree without roots." And so one of the things I love feminism, feminist history, all of that. And I started doing research on the history of sexual assault. And I was wondering too, how am I going to kind of bring this back to my passion for criminal justice reform and my passion for immigration reform. And it came to intersectionality, which is a core lens to view feminism. It's not just about white feminism, it's about feminism for women of all different identities and backgrounds. And so my research was actually about the history of sexual assault narratives, comparing white women narratives to narratives of Black women in different press. And again, that understanding, that context of immigration, criminal justice reform, and feminist history made my research and my insights all the richer because it was interdisciplinary, it was intersectional. And so I think that's another beautiful thing, especially when you're passionate about social justice issues. We live in a hyper interconnected world, and there's a way to kind of do your advocacy with more intersectionality if you don't limit yourself to just learning one thing or the other and prematurely doing one thing when you might be actually more passionate about the other, or they might be stronger when learned together.
Mm-hmm. I think last summer I read a biography on Steve Jobs, and during his presentation, he would have like at the crossroads, liberal arts and technology. And I'm reminded of that when you're talking about that, because when you have a multidisciplinary approach to learning or educating yourself, you're able to make so many new connections than someone who silos themselves or is limiting themselves to a certain narrative. I kind of want to go in a little bit of a different direction, and I think one of the ways that both of our organizations really align is our focus on mentorship. And obviously, mentorship is extremely crucial, especially in the formative teenager years. So how do you suggest teenagers find the right mentors, not only when it comes to relationships with adult mentors or people who can guide them in the future, but also nurturing friendships that can be fundamental in shaping the trajectory of their lives?
That's such a wonderful question. One, if you want to get started, you can come to Curious Cardinals to find them. I think that we don't teach students how to, one, seek out and maintain mentorship relationships, but also kind of networking 101. One of the things we often work with students on is how to send cold emails, how to send thank you notes and follow-ups. If you're going to ask for someone's time, you need to send them a thank you note. And it doesn't have to be handwritten, though that's a really nice touch, but it is an acknowledgement for their time and appreciation for whatever you learn for them, and an indication of, I hope to stay in touch, or I'll keep you posted on my progress from here. And so I think that's one key thing, is that gratitude and learning how to engage with people professionally. So you don't reach out to someone and then kind of convey disrespect for their time, as well as their kind of openness to potentially serve as a mentor. I think it's also about where you're at in your journey again. So as a high schooler, that's why we're passionate about near-peer mentorship. Yes, you can find a mentor 20, 30 years from you that's doing the career that you want to do. And that person might be a true role model, but they're very far ahead of your path. And when you kind of think about breaking down the steps to where they got to today, it almost feels daunting and unattainable to think about that. And the world in which they lived and climbed that ladder, or whatever it may be, was very different than the one you're in. So that's where I really believe in the power of near-peer mentorship, because you can learn from someone who's just a few steps ahead of you, and they're going through that learning process themselves and can shed light upon that which wish they wish they knew when they were in your shoes as a high schooler. And then you can ask, hey, you're a sophomore at a school that I'm dreaming of going to. Please challenge me. Are my dreams right? What's the school actually like? What should I think about that you didn't think about? So I think that's also like where to go to find the mentor, depending on the stage of life you're in. And I think for high schoolers, finding college age mentors is really impactful. That's why that's the model at Curious Cardinals. But even beyond that, finding people in your community, again, who are just a few years ahead of you can make a world of a difference. Another core part of mentorship, which again, this is part of our approach at Curious Cardinals, is the representation piece. Whether it's your gender, your race, a learning difference you have, an aspiration to be a college athlete, your hometown, whatever it is that's most core to who you are and going to paint your personal experiences, find a mentor who shares that. Because, for example, for me, it's really impactful to have female mentorships because being a female founder and a CEO is a unique experience. And that's not to say I'm not super grateful for the male mentors in my life. I am, but certain things are kind of unique through the vantage point of being a woman in this position. So whatever it is, again, that's most core to your identity, seeking out mentors that match that so you really feel seen and heard in your personal experiences is key. And then I think the final thing in thinking about friendships is you are who you surround yourself with. And my godmother always says there are drains and there are fountains. And that's a very visceral thing to lean into. How does someone make you feel? Do they elevate you? Do they kind of bring you down and make you feel not so great? So I think my biggest advice to high schoolers and anyone is surround yourself with people who lift you up and make you feel great and are going to cheer you on because you'll hopefully want to do the same for your friends. And it's easy to forget that friendship is a choice. And certain friendships can be really draining or even toxic, unfortunately. But the positive friendships in your life will be the best things ever. They will be the people you turn to when you're down and you need support. They will be the people to turn to when you got that internship or you won that award and you want someone to celebrate with. And then being able to give that to them too is the most beautiful thing in friendship, is kind of that reciprocity. So I think take friendship seriously because it's not just the mentors, it's also the friends in your life that'll propel you forward.
Yeah, one thing you touched on when you were talking about that was how kind of the isolating experience of being a woman in business and being a CEO. That's part of this marginalized group that a lot, because the business world is primarily dominated by men. But recent news about people like Elizabeth Holmes and Charlie Jarvis, people have begun already writing off women in the business world, and that's already exacerbated pre-existing prejudices. So could you talk a little bit about some of the obstacles or biases that you've experienced and how you've overcome them, and how we can also address and overcome these challenges to make the business environment more inclusive and equitable for marginalized groups?
Yeah, what a thoughtful question. So one thing I will say is representation does really matter. Oftentimes people will bring up Elizabeth Holmes to me. I am not doing anything similar, but I did leave Stanford early. And I think it just comes down to the representation. They don't have someone else to refer to. So it's trying to, in conversation, we often try to find points of commonality. And so they bring up Elizabeth Holmes. But it does speak to the fact that there aren't many positive role models of female founders out there, female leadership out there. And so how does that negatively affect you? People are going to harbor certain beliefs or stereotypes, and you're just going to have to be ultra mindful of those. And I think the biggest thing is to not let them get you down. One thing I'll say, especially with Elizabeth Holmes and kind of this stereotype that women are like liars or mischievous, is I've definitely felt the need in overcompensating for that to be overly truthful or overshare, because I don't want someone to mistake my truth when I'm only trying to show up as my most authentic, truthful self. And while I still sometimes have a tendency to do that, I've really been working on it personally, that all I have to do is listen to myself, especially when you're putting yourself out there, building something, sharing content with the world, whatever it is. People are going to make assumptions, make judgments, and try to put you down. And it's so easy to let the noise get to you or bring you down. And you just have to ask yourself, do I feel good about what I'm doing? How do I feel like I'm being truthful? And that's all you can do, is kind of turn to your internal compass. And so I think that's been a key learning for me. And also assuming miscommunication, not malintent. It's super easy to live in the world and think everyone's out to get me, or, oh my God, I'm so offended by the fact that that person brought up Elizabeth Holmes or made that sexist comment. And instead, I think it's better to lead with curiosity and really assume, I'm sure there was a miscommunication here, or I'm sure the intent wasn't malice, instead of assuming that must be a bad person. I'm a very positive person and forward-facing person. And I think when you carry that outlook, life is a lot more fun and uplifting, and you're able to engage in some pretty meaningful conversations with people when you lead with curiosity rather than make a first assumption of judgment or malice, as I said. And then I think, how can we make the world more inclusive, especially for people of marginalized backgrounds entering business? One is starting young. The stat is between ages 12 and 13, the proportion of girls who said they were not allowed to fail increased from 18 to 45%.
Wow.
Crazy. That's staggering. And you can see that that kind of aligns with when young girls start going through puberty and growing up. And so I think we need to start earlier. You can't just solve these things when you get to the workplace. We need to start earlier and telling women what they're capable of doing, ensuring representation in their curriculum. And that's not just for women, that's for all marginalized backgrounds and identities, because it starts young. So I think that's kind of the final thing I'll say to how we can make a change, is really starting young and thinking about what are the systemic things that people are taught or instilled in them from an early age that make them believe they're capable or not. And how can we create an environment where everyone default believes in their capabilities?
Mm-hmm. That's really powerful. And as we're talking about some of these people that are inspiring us and how we can cultivate deeper and more meaningful relationships, I'd like to ask you, who are some of the people that inspire you and why do they inspire you?
Yeah, lots of people that inspire me. There's many, especially female leaders, that I really, really look up to and admire. I admire, as I said, male leaders too, but I think that that representation piece is a core value of mine. I really am a huge fan of Sarah Blakely, the founder and CEO of Spanx.
Yeah.
She's incredible. One of the things I so love in her is her fearlessness. She talks about what holds people back is a fear of failure. And why are they afraid of failure? They're afraid of embarrassment. And so she will actively practice embarrassing herself. She'll like go in an elevator and start singing. And I love that, because I think that, and she says that the best thing that comes out of it is a fun story to tell people. And so I think that like active practice of getting over a feel of failure is the best thing you can do. And I love how she does so fearlessly. And her leadership in building Spanx just seems so authentic to who she is. Hearing her story, so many people doubted her and her lack of business acumen or prior experience. And for her, it was just about kind of intuition and that passion. And so I so admire that. Personally, I've been really lucky to find some amazing female role models as well. One of them is Deb Liu. She's a Curious Cardinals mom and the CEO of Ancestry. And what I so admire in her is she exemplifies candor with care. She always is honest with me, and I know that's just because she believes in me. And I found another recent mentor whose name is Alexa Von Tobel, who's the founder of a company called LearnVest, whose daughter also does Curious Cardinals. I'm really lucky to be able to find a lot of my mentors through our parent community. And she as well leads with that candor. I think that it's easy to get offended when someone gives you criticism or feedback, but I now know that it's not easy to give someone feedback. It's a lot easier to smile and clap your hands and say, that was great. And so I now know that candor with care. Feedback is the greatest gift one can give. And the fact that I've been able to find some incredible female role models who believe in me so much that they're able to be that honest with me has made a world of a difference.
I know one thing that you keep bringing up again is reconnecting with your like inner self and finding the authenticity. And how do you recommend teenagers reconnect with that intuition and kind of like that gut feeling that you kind of lead with, and a lot of people that inspire you lead with also?
It's so hard, especially as a teenager, especially growing up on social media. It now not only feels like embarrassment is like tripping in the cafeteria, it's now like posting something cringe on social media and not being too able to escape the screenshots that come thereafter. So I think there's this like real fear of embarrassment and judgment, especially in this digital world that I've grown up into. I think that it's a practice. I am still working on not caring about what people think, because it's going to just hold me back so much, and really asking myself, what do I think? Do I feel passionate about that? For example, people have commented on Curious Cardinals' emphasis of equity and access. We've had a financial aid program since day one. We didn't promote it at first because we didn't want to highlight that some students kind of different backgrounds. We just wanted to make this a component of our program. Then we realized that that was a real missed opportunity because we were not sharing the incredible work we were doing to ensure that first generation low income students whose parents can't afford our services are able to benefit from our community and our personalized mentorship approach. So a lot of people have kind of, again, they make a judgment and say that's something we don't care about. And it's super easy to be hurt. Why don't they know that I care about that? Why don't they know that we've been working so hard at this since day one? And so now that has been a reframe of, do I feel proud of what we've done? Do I feel like it's been enough? Do I think that we could do a better job sharing it? Do I think there's always more to be done? Absolutely. But just really asking myself and looking inwards. And so I think if you experience that, if you feel that judgment, if someone says something that makes you feel badly, if a friend doesn't reciprocate your love or care in a certain way, ask yourself, am I proud of how I showed up as a friend? Do I feel like that was fair? And again, that's not to say to not be empathetic, still put yourself in the shoes of others and maybe try to understand, I can see from their vantage point how they might have assumed that. And again, as I said, the miscommunication, not malice, but I think just that active practice of asking yourself, do I feel good about what I've done? And knowing that that's all you ultimately have control of. And of course, treating others with the kindness and respect that you hope they will share with you.
And I'd like to end off with a final question. This I know that like there's this huge emphasis on mentorship and the near to peer mentorship. And I was wondering if you could give advice to your past high school self, and I guess to all of the other high schoolers listening, what would you say? It's like a final piece.
That is so hard. I think it's similar to what I just said. One of our amazing investors, who's also a Curious Cardinals mom named Emily White, said this on a panel I moderated once. She said, listen to your whispers before they become screams. And I think that that's, again, listen to your intuition. How does something make you feel? Do you care about this or not? Could you have shown up as a better version of yourself and really trust your gut? And I wish I told myself to start looking inwards earlier and believing myself. And really, even if I was questioning my moral framework, ever developing that moral framework and say, this is how I think about things. This is the legacy I want to leave in the world. And this is how I hope to share kindness and respect and compassion for others. And so I think I would tell myself to listen to yourself and trust your gut and care less and listen less to what other people have to say, because at the end of the day, it's just you.